If you understand that abusive parents exist, and you understand that bigoted parents exist, and often bigoted parents, if their child ends up dating a member of a minority group, those children can often be met with verbal or physical abuse. If Johnny wants to be in ballet instead of football, that child can often be met with physical abuse. If a child ends up thinking they might be the gender that they weren't assigned at birth or would like to maybe test it out, they might be the victim of abuse from their parent. Understanding that, and understanding that that's what the bill is supposed to stop, the child abuse that might occur, should that information be brought to the attention of the parents, when parents should know about it already and not care, but instead they don't know about it because the children don't trust their parents enough to tell them about it because they know they'll probably be abused if they do tell them about it. The school shouldn't then tell the parents information about the child that would lead to the child's abuse. So that's what the bill is trying to stop. And then Elon Musk doesn't like that because the right-wing conservatives are just pro-abusing children. So in the midst of a whole bunch of other stuff going on in the news that you have undoubtedly seen and don't really need to hear me weigh in on, though I probably will anyway, California and the governor there, Gavin Newsom, signed the Protect the Children bill, at least the more recent one, and conservatives are really mad about it for strange reasons. So here's Libs of TikTok and the time that she's not doxing random moms working at a Home Depot to put food on the table who made uncouth jokes about the attempt on Donald Trump. Now that comedy is illegal and the First Amendment defenders hate the First Amendment, she's doxing all of them, whatever. Gavin Newsom signed AB 1955 today, which bans schools from making rules requiring parental notification if a child identifies as transgender. Now, you might be thinking, why should the school have to notify a parent if the child tells somebody at the school that they think they might be trans? Why should they have to do that? Now, it's a bit of an odd question, because the answer from right-wingers would be like, it's parental rights. The school shouldn't know nothing I don't know about my own kid. But it's like, why do they know about it then? And it's because the children aren't telling you. Why aren't the children telling you? You're the parent. They're supposed to trust you with literally their life. You're the one who gave it to them, ostensibly. So why don't they trust you enough as a child to tell you about these thoughts they have about their own identity, and rather tell like the people at their school, their teacher, guidance counselor, whatever, about it first? Should be called for some kind of introspection on the part of parents out there who find themselves in that position. But no, these people, they just view their children as property. They think they can do whatever they want to them without any recourse because they're the ones who, in most cases, accidentally brought them into the world. And it's not great, folks. So obviously the right wing doesn't like this because they like to be able to control children, do whatever they want with them. They understand that a lot of parents would like to be able to control their children and mold them like essentially like clay into whatever they want them to be rather than letting their child be their own individual person. This is symptomatic of like suburban culture, of the whole idea of like a soccer mom kind of culture where you move out into the middle of nowhere where the children don't have like local parks to go to or that you can bring them to hang out with friends their own age. The only time they could hang out with people without needing a car to get around is if they happen to be lucky enough to live around a kid their own age in their suburb. The idea that a variety of other countries are safe enough for children to walk around or bike around to school, to after school extracurricular activities. You need to, drive your kid everywhere in the United States, not only because of the way that the infrastructure is laid out, but also because they just don't trust their kids to be individuals. Even though they always talk about how like the individualistic nature and like the can-do, rough and tumble nature of like being able to be your own person, even at like a young age, we're like, these kids that are going into work so early at like age 14 at their local supermarket. I started working young and, I'm proud of little Johnny for doing so as well. They don't trust their kids to be able to bike to school and like want to keep them within arm's reach at all times because they're like inherently untrustworthy of every other person around them. Obviously, in the United States of America, the main reason why this is the case is because you need a car to get anywhere. There's no like walkability at all, so like it's not safe for even adults to be walking around in a lot of instances. Pedestrian deaths because of cars are very high because of the way that we've set up our shit. Anyway, I'm ranting because I talk a lot all the time about shit and always go on a variety of different branching paths. They are like helicopter parents to the point where like they want to have their kid be exactly what they want them to be instead of whatever the kid wants to be. There's going to be a lot of parents who push their kids to go into sports when the kids might not necessarily want to, or like even if they try it out, they end up not liking it. The parents will get mad about it because they're trying to live vicariously through their children. There's a whole bunch of different examples of this in like less obvious ways than if the kid turns out to maybe have like questions about their gender identity. Maybe they don't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. Maybe they would like to use a different name even that might not even be relevant to their gender identity. Like their name might be Joseph and they would rather be Thomas, you know? Whatever like ways that tends to be, a lot of parents don't want their children to be their own person. And this law is aimed to protect kids who are aware that their parents are that way. This law protects kids from parents who are likely to not be a big fan of their own child should their child turn out to, like, in a simple, less severe way, not want to go into the sport that the parents want them to go into. Or in this specific instance, have questions about their gender identity, want to use a different name, maybe want to try different pronouns, whatever. Usually, kids understand if their parents are bigoted or not. This can even be the case with when, like, a kid has a crush on another kid in class, but, like, the kid is white and the person they have a crush on in their class is a black person, you know, a black kid in their class, and they know their parents are racist and they wouldn't like that if they like wanted to go out on like a play date or any kind of shit like that, or even frankly even like regular ass friendships. Like, there are some racist-ass parents that, like, their kid might go to school, just be friends with a black person, and if their parent ends up finding out about it, they could, like, feel some type of way about it. There's a whole, like, list of ways that parents will be really weird about their kids and can often lead to, like, verbal or physical abuse, depending on what the kid is doing that contradicts what the parent wants them to do or be. And this law is aimed to try to help kids not have to deal with that, you know? Because, like, people kind of wear their politics on their sleeve when it comes to, like, being in the privacy of their own home. So, like, the parent might not be, like, openly racist or homophobic or whatever out in public, but, like, at home, the kid is hearing what their dad or mom is talking about to one another. Right? Like, if the dad or mom is a Trump supporter, the kid's already got to know what that probably entails. And if it turns out that those people, their parents are queerphobic, whatever, they're going to know about it. And if it turns out then the kid in the future understands themselves to not be cisgender, to understands themselves to, like, they're a boy and they have a crush on a boy in their class, you know, they understand that if that information gets brought to the parents, they could face verbal or physical abuse. The reason why youth homelessness among queer people is very high is because once bigoted parents find out that their kid might like want to use a different name, different pronouns, identify in a way that doesn't conform to what they want their kid to be, they get kicked out of the house, which is a violent act for one, because you need to forcibly remove your own child from your own home. It is inherently violent, not to mention the negative externalities of that when it comes to being homeless as a youth and being homeless as a youth of a marginalized identity. But if it isn't the case that they end up getting kicked out, which, you know, the rates of youth homelessness among queer people are pretty high, disproportionately so, well, then they could also face verbal or physical abuse at home, and that often happens. A lot of the times, you'll see so-called protect the children people on social media, like on Twitter, be like, oh yeah, what would you do if you found out that your son was gay, or that your son thinks that they might be a girl actually, or whatever, or want to be? They usually just reply with child abuse. Like, they sugarcoat it, but it's usually along the lines of, well, I would beat the gay out of him, or whatever, you know? That's usually their response. And, like, kids know that. Kids are aware that their parents might be like unhinged in that way even before they've done anything bad because of how they might act to other people or how they've acted to them in the past or how they act to their spouse or whatever in the past or their other siblings. So like a lot of the times kids are just not going to tell their parents that kind of information about themselves, even though they should trust their parents enough to tell them anything, because of the failing of the parent to not like earn the trust of their kid. Like it's pretty simple. So, like, the law is literally an anti-child abuse law. It's literally a protect the kids law against bigoted parents that are abusive to their children. And that's why people like libs of TikTok, Chaya Red Chick don't like it because they're, big fans of child abuse. That's why people like Elon Musk don't like it because he's already essentially disowned his own trans kid. And the reason, he bought the website Twitter and is on this right-wing bent is because he has a trans kid and is going to do anything to like get back at her or whatever. People like Matt Walsh, who are big fans of abusing children, allegedly, are not going to like this bill very much. And they're going to be able to code it and hide that fact behind a whole bunch of flowery rhetoric, like, oh, well, it's about parental rights. Like the school should never know something about a kid that I don't know about. And it's like, why does your own child, your own flesh and blood, the person you brought into this world and have raised, not trust you as much as they trust people at their school? Because, like, kids will always keep secrets from the parents. It doesn't have to be for anything as severe as, like, their own gender identity or whatever. Like, they'll just keep secret, like, they might be, like, cursing at school, and, like, the parent wouldn't like that, but they won't let the parent know about that, right? Because they could get in trouble. Or, like, they might skip class one day and hide that from their parents. These are very, like, simple things. They might, like, steal a fucking cookie out of a cookie jar and not tell their parent about it, Kids hide shit about, what they're doing from their parents all the goddamn time. And for a lot of like mundane shit. Now, obviously, if it's like life-threatening, like if they're fucking doing drugs or whatever, like that's some shit that needs to be known by the parents, hopefully. But like for very mundane shit like that, and I would classify a kid thinking like they would prefer to be seen in society as like a gender they're not assigned at birth or whatever, use a different name, blah, 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 blah. You know, they're a boy and they have a crush on a boy, or they're a girl and they have a crush on a girl in their class. Like, that shit is fucking mundane as hell. Nobody should care about it. The parents shouldn't care about it. Nobody should fucking care about it. Because, like, motherfuckers don't care about, like, when Johnny has a crush on Jennifer in his class. Nobody gives a shit about that because they find it to be normal or whatever. But as soon as, like, Johnny finds Jeff in his class to fancy him or whatever, like, suddenly it's an issue. So essentially, California signed into law a Protect the Children bill, an anti-child abuse bill, and Elon Musk responded by moving the infrastructure of 2 of his companies out of the state. Simply put, as simple as I can put it. California passed an anti-child abuse law, and Elon Musk responded by moving the infrastructure of his fucking companies out of the state in protest. Now, obviously, he was going to do this anyway. This is just a good way to, you know, virtue signal to right-wingers how much he's, like, anti-woke or whatever, and, like, to make a political statement. But, like, this was the convenient excuse he was using. And that looks really fucking weird, man. I don't understand. And that should be the take, by the way. Like, that's not a reach in any sense of the word. If you understand that abusive parents exist, and you understand that bigoted parents exist, and often bigoted parents, if their child ends up dating a member of a minority group, those children can often be met with verbal or physical abuse. If Johnny wants to be in ballet instead of football, that child can often be met with physical abuse. If a child ends up thinking they might be the gender that they weren't assigned at birth or would like to maybe test it out, they might be the victim of abuse from their parent. Understanding that, and understanding that that's what the bill is supposed to stop, the child abuse that might occur, should that information be brought to the attention of the parents, when the parents should know about it already and not care, but instead they don't know about it because the children don't trust their parents enough to tell them about it because they know they'll probably be abused if they do tell them about it. The school shouldn't then tell the parents information about the child that would lead to the child's abuse. So that's what the bill is trying to stop. And then Elon Musk doesn't like that because the right-wing conservatives are just pro-abusing children. And they always have been. They literally, like, that's not even my words. You don't have to take my word for it. They will tell you. They will be proudly, happily loud about how they are fans of child abuse. Because they always talk about it. Like, I was spanked as a kid and now I'm okay. There's a variety of states that still allow for a corporal punishment in school, which is teachers, like, spanking your kid. Like, not even being in favor of being able to spank your own kid, which is just child abuse. There's no study has ever produced any kind of result that showed that there was any benefit to it at all. It is literally just child abuse. It is negative. It causes so many negative downstream effects as well, past the fact that it's literally an abusive act. But conservatives are okay with it. And they're okay with literally, like, people that aren't even related to their child, when nobody should be doing it, but, like, the teachers in the school doing it to your kid, like, they're okay with that in a lot of these southern states, because corporal punishment is not allowed in a lot of Democrat-run blue states. Like, they are very proudly, openly pro-child abuse. They always have been, because they want to be able to control their children. And the only way they know how to control their children is through brute force. And it's a problem. So he's saying he's moving SpaceX HQ from California to Texas, and Twitter HQ to Austin, Texas. It's a bit weird, you know, to protest the anti-child abuse law by moving the headquarters of your companies to another state. But I mean, do you, I suppose, live your truth? We've also got another fan of being a danger to children weighing in. From Matt Walsh, California passed a bill banning schools from informing parents about their children's, quote, gender identity. If a child transitions, quote unquote, at school, the parents have no right to know about it. This is a horrendous policy for all of the obvious reasons, and also for a reason that isn't often mentioned. Kids who identify as trans are at a high risk for suicide, he says, trying to hold back laughs, trying to hold back the smile on his face at the thought of trans people killing themselves. For that reason alone, and so many other reasons, parents need to know. It's unconscionable that a child would be in a high-risk group for suicide, and that fact would be concealed from the parents. Pure evil. Kids will die as a result of this law. So it's just literally like Satan twisting the fact that the primary reasons trans people may try to do, like, one of the worst mistakes of their life, which is take their own life. It's not because of, like, some genetic code in their DNA that made it so that they were trans and then therefore want to kill themselves. It's because of the environment that they find themselves in and their understanding of the fact that they're not accepted as the person that they are by their parents, by politicians that have power over their lives, by their peers in school or whatever, the bullying that they might be subject to, the abuse that they might be subject to from their own parents. Because like I say, youth homelessness for queer youth very high because of the fact that bigoted parents will often abuse their kids if their kids come out as whatever they're bigoted against. That's why the suicide rate is as high as it is. It's because of people like Matt Walsh. And I've always said, like, they don't care that queer people might kill themselves because of that. That's what they want, right? Like, what they really want is to be able to do it themselves. But their kindness to you is, instead of like just doing it themselves and rounding you up into camps, it's to provide for an environment such that you do it by your own hand. Because at least you have control over that, you know? That's their kindness to you. And because of that, like, being of any marginalized identity and staying alive is a revolutionary act against sickos like this. So, like, he's advocating for a higher suicide rate for trans people in this tweet. If you understand the fact that that is why rates of suicide attempts or suicide, that's why those rates are high for trans people, because of the abuse they suffer from their parents, from their community, and their environment, and the lack of hope that they have and the alienation that they feel, telling the parent who is likely to abuse that kid for the fact that the kid might be of one of those marginalized groups only increases the likelihood that that parent abuses them and then further increases their risk for suicide. But as always, you have to bend anything that you can, spin it into your own way so that you can continue the project that you have of expunging any demographic group that isn't white, religious, I should say Christian, you know, from the earth. So, like, quite literally, the law that has been passed in California is to protect children from people like Matt Walsh. There's a variety of other laws that have been passed to protect children from people like Matt Walsh, but they're not really in the conversation right now. This one in particular is that I have no doubt in my mind that if one of Matt Walsh's children came out as whatever, as like having a crush on somebody of their own gender in their class, or wanting to be referred to as the gender they weren't assigned at birth, he would abuse them. I have no doubt in my mind. You know, I have no way to know that for sure, but the clues are there. It's not that hard of a conclusion to reach. So they're getting mad at a law that specifically protects children from them. Now, don't ask them, of course, about their opinions on laws governing the age of consent, which are laws that are meant to protect children from adults as well. They have some questions about that one as well. In fact, they talk about it more than this one. But I digress. This is a basic principle. School should not know anything about my child that I don't know. Then why isn't your child telling you? You failed as a parent if your child doesn't trust you enough to tell you anything about themselves. You have failed as a parent if your child trusts their school and the people in it more than they trust you, especially with something so fundamental to the child like their own identity. They should not be keeping any secrets from me. It's a classic grooming tactic. Don't tell your parents. This will be our little secret. What child predators say to their victims. Absolutely sick. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I think conservatives are incapable of even considering what they already think is wrong. Well, maybe like the run-of-the-mill, you know, general conservative out there, but the pundits and politicians, until proven otherwise, in my mind, are fully aware of what they're doing. Like, Matt Walsh is completely aware of the fact that every step that he makes when it comes to his commentary surrounding queer people is a step in his project for his hopeful future of eradicating queer people from society through one method or another. I am fully convinced that he is 100% sober and aware of that fact about himself. Much the same way that I think that of, you know, Donald Trump, Greg Abbott, of any elected politician that's pushing this kind of rhetoric. What is this?
I violate
Oh, yeah.
my kids' consent all the time.
So for the context of this clip, he was talking about how there was a book, I think, that was teaching children about the concept of consent. And one of the examples, I think, was like, your parents should have to ask you for a hug, not just hug you, or something simple like that, which I think is a good way to teach a kid about the concept of consent. Be like, oh, can I give you a hug? Rather than just doing it. And then the kid could be like, yes or no. And then you respect that response. Like that, it was around something like that. And then he responded with that, and obviously what he means to say is that, like, if his kid wants to eat ice cream for dinner, he's gonna not let them do that, and that's a violation of their consent or whatever. That's, like, the point he's trying to get at. It just doesn't look very good when you look at his broader body of work and his comments about children, you know? Anyway, if I had a child, I would not trust them around any conservative pundit, especially not Donald Trump, because of the recent revelations surrounding his close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and what he did or directed an underage girl to do. It's just not good, folks. And I don't think Biden is free from sin from that either. I definitely know Bill Clinton isn't. It's bad on both sides. It just seems to be worse on the Republican side of things. Anyway, at least they're open enough to tell you who they are. That's the silver lining, you know? It's like with an air horn, too. Like the Protect the Children law comes out in California, and then Elon Musk moves his companies out of the state. He's kind of just telling you who he is at that point, which I think is nice of him. And mind you, this is also the side of the fence that's always talking about homeschooling, because they don't want their children to go to a public school, because then that child might learn that, like, gay people exist, and that's fine. And that child might also learn that, like, slavery was bad. Conservatives don't like that idea, so they always talk about, like, homeschooling your kids or whatever, or sending them to private schools. It's not any of that. Well, I mean, it is the fact that they don't want their child to learn that slavery is bad, but also that they want to be able to groom their own children into their ideological worldview and their political worldview. And they understand that, like, being taught about reality in a public school based around public school curriculum is going to make their child less likely to be as stupid as they are and less likely to be conservative, but I repeat myself. Like, one of the great political projects of the Republican Party and of the conservative movement is to try to stop the impossibly large tide of young people becoming more and more progressive as they get older, contrary to trends of the past where the older people got, the more conservative they would get. And the method for achieving that is trying to indoctrinate children. There are so many red flags in the conservative movement, and I would hope that it's going to be easy for people to see, but the opposition party doesn't talk about it enough. And a lot of that is probably because they're not, like I say, free of sin in that particular instance either, because of people like Bill Clinton, etc. Not good, folks. Not good.